Praise be Jesus and Mary. Upon first hearing these words, they might sound confusing, especially when our Lord says, or particularly where our Lord says, to use dishonest wealth to gain friends. So what does this mean? Well, firstly, he's calling money dishonest, not to indicate the need of our being dishonest in using it, but to say that money is generally tainted by a dishonest use because of the disordered love that man has for money. So basically saying that thing, money, which is so tainted and so often subject to dishonest use and is therefore tainted, use it for good. Use it for serving God. Use it for the good of your neighbor. And use it for an eternal reward. So certainly he's not pointing to any dishonesty in the use we make of it, but in turning that thing which is so subject to dishonesty into something that we use for serving God. It's easy to distinguish here between serving money and serving God using money. Two entirely different things. In the first case, money becomes the end. Or in some way, I myself am the end. I just serve myself by seeking money so that I can, get that which I want. I can have more power. So I put all my trust, my hope in that money, my security is in that money. I'm serving that money. It's the end for which I act. Whereas in the second case, we love God. Our security is placed in Him. He is our hope. And while we are wayfarers, we make use of money, but we just use it as a means. It's not the end, it's not our hope, it's not our security. And even though that money is so often subject to dishonesty, we're called to use it honestly for love of God. So that's basically what the teaching is here. And that's brought out by the fact that our Lord goes on to say, St. Luke points it out, that the Pharisees loved money. So our Lord is actually pointing, we can understand what he said in the first part in the light of what St. Luke points out, that the Pharisees had this disordered love of money, to the point that they actually sneered at this teaching that Jesus gave them. And our Lord also points it out when he says that no servant can serve two masters. If you're serving money as an end, you can't serve God with your whole heart, mind, and soul at the same time. You can only serve one or the other. In the first reading, this is long reading with a whole lot of difficult to pronounce names. But anyway, at the end, St. Paul says something very important. He talks about the obedience of faith. Make known to all nations the good news to bring about the obedience of faith. This is a very important concept. The obedience of faith is when man, recognizing the authority of God, subjects in humility his intellect to divine revelation, and so accepts that which God teaches him as truth. So there's an obedience of faith here. I subject myself to the truth that God teaches me, and therefore even to His will, because I recognize in Him the supreme authority. If there's no obedience of faith, well, man's going to end up serving and considering, you could say, the ultimate criteria and source of truth, his own judgment. What I think is truth, what I conceive or perceive to be good and good for myself, that's just my truth, which just is false. We cannot invent truth. Our intellect has not been made for inventing truth. It's been made to understand truth, to recognize truth, to be enlightened by truth, and to accept that truth, but not to invent it. That's one of the great errors of our times. With a sort of absolute relativism where everything, you could say the truth by which everyone lives is just simply their own set of, principles that they've adhered to and made up on the basis of what they like, really. So that's where we get out, we get all kinds of ideologies, and then man who even denies that there is some kind of absolute truth and just lives according to, the little truths that he makes up and considers in a very real sense absolute. Today we celebrate Blessed John Duns Scotus, one of the greatest and most influential Franciscan theologians of all time. He was born in 1265, and at a very young age of 15, became a Franciscan, and he studied at the famous university in Paris, which in that time was considered the greatest university in the whole world. And he became a great authority on a lot of difficult questions. One of them was the question of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So you could say the opposing school was the Dominican one, headed by St. Thomas, where they could not reconcile what St. Paul says, where he says that everyone has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and therefore we're all in need of redemption. St. Thomas couldn't reconcile that with the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which would have meant that she had no need of being redeemed. Whereas Blessed John Duns Scotus points out that she was redeemed, but in the most perfect way, with a preservative redemption. In other words, she was redeemed. The power of the Redeemer is displayed in her, not by drawing her out of original sin, but by preserving her from falling into original sin. So it's his redeeming power is displayed to the highest and most perfect degree. It's one thing to draw someone out of the mud, but it's more perfect to preserve them from falling into the mud, so to speak. So that's exactly what he did with Our Blessed Lady. And that's what his very theological formula that he used to defend the Immaculate Conception was used in the bull of approbation for the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. He's also known, one of another key questions regards the purpose of the Incarnation. So St. Thomas says that the Incarnation, so God's becoming man, was determined solely by sin. In other words, Jesus came, according to St. Thomas, simply to atone for sin and reconcile man with God. And therefore, says St. Thomas, if Adam had not sinned, Jesus would not have come. So the whole Incarnation is hinged on man's sinning. Whereas Blessed John Duns Scotus puts the end of the Incarnation in something much higher and more perfect. He says that the end here is God's desire for his creatures to be united to himself, to share in his love. And that the Incarnation serves above all in God's mind as the means by which the creature comes to share in God's love, in his glory. And in God's plan, says Blessed John Duns Scotus, the Word was to become flesh in every case, even if Adam had not sinned. And the Word made flesh, Jesus, would have in every case been the one through whom the Holy Trinity would have received its greatest glory. You could say that part of creation that in every case would have given the greatest glory to the Father, and through whom the rest of creation, man, would have attained the perfect share in God's love and in his glory. And this independent of sin. The only thing that changes that after the fall of Adam is the mode. Now he has to come not only as a glorifier, not only as him through whom man would attain divine sonship, but also as a redeemer, and therefore have to suffer. So the end of the Incarnation is placed in something much more perfect and much higher. Let us thank our Lord that in his goodness he raises up theologians and doctors who deepen our understanding of the faith, of divine truth. This is actually very important someone could just write that off as something secondary, but that's actually of primary importance. That's why so much importance is given, for example, to the doctors of the Church. They help us understand and adhere to divine truth. And they keep the Church in a faithful understanding of divine truth and a faithful application of that truth in the changing circumstances of different eras. So let us thank our Lord for this and ask Blessed John Duns Scotus and our Blessed Mother for the grace to always adhere to truth, the truth taught by God Himself, with a perfect obedience of faith. Praise be Jesus and Mary. Amen.